How are you evolving? What are the things that you're doing in your personal life to continually evolve?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been doing is, I teach a lot. I do a lot of teaching, both at Harvard and a grad class, and through executive education. I've started doing more speaking and now writing and things like that. And I found that I really like these things, and they are all a craft, and continually get better at those. So because I think leadership is important, and if I could make a big change in the world, I would love to evolve the craft of leadership, and to be able to do that, I'm going to be able to need to write about it well and speak about it well and teach about it well, so that people can understand it.
All right, everybody, welcome. We've got a special guest. This is very fast becoming one of my favorite books. I read through it, and now I'm going back through it because I've highlighted it, and I'm noticing things from her book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others. And in the different positions that I've been in the past, and I'm at right now with consulting and leading different companies, I find that some people need to read this book more than others. And sometimes I'm hoping, like, wait, was that me? Because you also, in the book, you allow for the reader to be very reflective, and you make me worried while I'm reading it because I'm very self-conscious. I'm like, am I the one screwing this up? But regardless, welcome everyone. The book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others, Why Great Leadership Begins with Self-Understanding. And we've got Margaret Andrews here. Welcome, Margaret. Thanks for doing this. Let's jump right into it. All right. When we're looking at intelligence and effort as a whole, do you think that there's a limit when it comes to either one of those when applied to the demands of leadership at any point?
Yes, I think that intelligence and hard work, and certain skills, technical and functional skills, get you pretty far in life. But there is a bit of a limit there, and I think what really encapsulated it for me was when I was running an executive program several years ago. And we were doing this case about a very gifted surgeon, Dr. Ron Ventura. And we were taking the position of his boss, a hospital administrator. We were trying to figure out, what do we do with this guy? He is a brilliant surgeon who does fantastic work and is raising the reputation and the revenues of the hospital, but on the other hand is a bully and is, yelling at people in the operating theater and running roughshod throughout the organization. So it's a pretty spirited debate that we're having in this class, with pretty good arguments on both sides. And just as we're sort of narrowing down the conversation, I see a hand raised in the back, and it's James, somebody who's been in the program the whole time but hasn't spoken the entire time. So I called on him, and he says from the back row, he says, "I'm Dr. Ventura." And just like in the movies, where you see everybody turn around at the same time, that's exactly what happened. And then he realizes what he just said. And he said, "Oh, I'm not the real Dr. Ventura." He said, "I'm not a surgeon. I'm an engineer." But he said, pretty much the rest of that case could have been written about me. He said, "I'm an excellent engineer." But he said, it's a lot of my behaviors that have gotten why I'm here. He said, "I was recently passed over for a promotion, and if I don't fix this, I'm probably going to get fired." So it was probably one of the bravest things I've ever heard in the classroom. But what was also interesting was at the next break, he was the most popular person. Everybody wanted to talk to him, which made me realize that there's a lot more Dr. Venturas out there. Or that many people think that they might be.
Interesting. So, two things I get from that. One is authenticity and sincerity when it comes to realizing, wait a second, I'm the problem, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I want to fix it, and I know I'm the problem, and I'm sorry. Opening up that way really attracts people to you, right?
It did. Absolutely, it did. Yes.
I like that a
Um,
lot. What does that say about somebody that leads that way? Because there's there's a dichotomy there, right?
mhm.
They're not easy to work with because they're like a bully, right? But they realize it every now and then, and they're like, I'm so sorry. How is that?
Well, I think the one where they say, "Oh gosh, so sorry," that works one or two times. But when that becomes the pattern, it really doesn't work. You're driving people out of the organization. What really works is when you stop and say, I don't want it to be this way. And I need to do something to change it, and then begin to work on it. Yeah, I think it's more that you are actually doing something about it and telling people that you're doing something about it rather than recognize it occasionally and saying, oops, sorry.
Taking them through that journey with you of progression, of getting better.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes that what I see is that, what I talk about is not rocket science necessarily, but it's hard to do. And I think because there's a lot of vulnerability there. A lot of times when you shine a light inside, you don't necessarily like what you see. And so I think it does take some level of courage to do that.
Okay. So then take me through what a good leader would look like, because I think it's easy for us to identify what, in general, what a bad character would look like because we see them in movies, we read about them in books, but it's not so clear what a good one would look like because you mentioned in your book there's a lot of different ways to lead. Um, but what are some of those characteristics you've seen that people love to follow because leaders have them?
Yeah. So rather than answering that question directly, which will sound so obvious when I say it, and everyone nods along, if it's all right with you, I'll take you through one of the exercises in the book that
Please do.
really
That's what I was getting
demonstrates
to,
it.
so thank you. I love
Yes,
that.
yes. And if you're listening, I hope you'll do this with us, right? I'm going to go through it quickly, but I hope you'll do it because it really demonstrates it. So what I do is I ask people to think of the very best boss you've ever had, right? It has to be somebody, it could be the person you're currently working with, person right before that, your first boss, whatever. But it needs to be somebody that you worked directly for, right? It can't be somebody else in the organization that you wish you worked with. Can't be a celebrity CEO unless you actually worked directly for them. And it
Okay.
can't be a fictional character. So you can't
Oh.
have Ted Lasso, right? It can't be that.
But that's such a good guy.
He's such a good guy, right? Yes. But
Okay.
we can't use that. So once you have that one person in mind, I ask people to think of all the reasons, big reasons, small reasons, why this person was your best boss. And, to just jot them down very quickly. Go for as many as you can. Break the big ones down into smaller ones, right? So you can't just say, oh, this person was a great leader. Well, gosh, what does that mean? And I've been doing this exercise for almost 2 decades, and I've heard so many reasons. Obviously, it could be that they were the smartest person you've ever worked with, or it could be that they were really great at something, whether it was surgery, if you're a surgeon, or programming in R, or, understanding the tax code, right? Some of these things that make us good at our job. It could be all kinds of other things. They saw something in you. They took a chance on you, whatever it is. So I'm buying time for those of you that are working on this. But so if you think about those and go for that long list, then what I ask people to do is to narrow that list down to their top 3, right? So circle or highlight or whatever it is. But to go for the long list first and then cut it, right? Because if we think of the top 3, sometimes you just choose the first 3 that come out of your head. But really, sometimes those aren't actually the real reasons for you. Sometimes it takes a little while to get those to come out. So when you circle or star or whatever your top 3, then we're sort of done with that part of the exercise. Then I tell people that the reasons people give, and I've done this with thousands of people from every industry all over the world, and they typically fall into 3 buckets. The first bucket is intelligence. So this is the one of they were the smartest person I've ever worked with, or smartest person in the organization, or something like that. The second bucket is around technical and functional skills. And those are things like they were great at programming in R, or they were, really good at fixing our computers, or, whatever it is, kind of their job, search engine optimization or whatever. And then the third bucket is around interpersonal skills, also known as relationship skills, soft skills, emotional intelligence, superpowers, right? Human skills, whatever you want to call them. And so then when I'm in a room with people, they before I reveal that, they write things down, one of the reasons on one of 3 Post-it notes, and then we put them up on the wall. Where are they? And people are usually kind of wowed by this, because the preponderance of Post-it notes go on one column, and they go in that third bucket.
Interpersonal, right?
Interpersonal skills, those relationship skills. And so, yeah. And so a lot of times I'll ask people, does that surprise you? And they kind of go, well, it did at first until I thought about it. Right. And so, but what's powerful about that is because I will tell you, years ago, I noticed that basically the answers were always the same, right? The Post-it notes were in relative proportion at each time I did it. And so I started taking them down and categorizing them. And, I built a big Excel spreadsheet with that and was tracking them. Of course I did, right? Wouldn't everyone do that? How nerdy is that?
So good.
But so what I found was that on average across these different groups, that 85% of the Post-it notes are in that third bucket. 85%. And the remaining, the remaining 15% is pretty evenly split between the other 2. So, this doesn't mean it's 85 in every group. I think the lowest I've ever seen was, I don't know, maybe it's like 78% or something like that. And the highest was probably 95 or something like that. But it's, on average, that's what it is. And so why I like to do that exercise is because if I just told you those things, everybody would go, yeah, of course. But then when you realize that that's what you value too, right? And it makes you think of that leader, it makes a big difference. And it really kind of changes the way we think about it.
That makes sense. So I have a question about us valuing that, and I agree with you. So how is it that we value interpersonal skills and then find ourselves in situations where we choose leadership that doesn't seem to have interpersonal skills sometimes?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think I've heard it also asked a slightly different way is, are these opposites? Is, high performance opposite of these things? And it depends on, a couple of things I want to say. One is that lots and lots of leadership styles can work, but they need to be fit for context, right? So the leadership skills you need when you are starting a company with, just a couple people in a garage might be different as you scale it, as you IPO, right? And this is one reason why so many different organizations go under, is because we don't have those skills when we need them. So lots of different styles can work. And I would say that over the long term, it's the people that can do both, right? Is to have those relationships with people that they want to follow those people. In fact, when I do that best boss exercise, I always ask people, I say, would you work for this person again? Right? If obviously the situation was right. And I see an absolute sea of nodding heads. right? Because you would. This person believed in you, trusted you, developed you, were helped to make you who you are today. So they are not. You get more from people by treating them well. Yeah.
I love your answer. The context, I guess it makes sense when you said it, but the context does matter, right?
Yeah, the context does matter. And
Because
yeah.
I
Go
was
ahead.
thinking politicians, right? How do we vote in our politicians and decide to choose who we choose? And sometimes it's just so crazy. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we end up there? Anyway, it's a whole different thing. But when it comes to understanding yourself and seeing how we can better ourselves, you had a list of 6 questions
Mm-hmm.
in chapter 3. And I went through that process. It was kind of like, I felt like it was just for me. I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and fill these out in a journal.
Good for you.
And I really like those because I felt like, I don't know that I had thought about all of those questions before and given it time. And one of the very first one, I'll read it to you, is who and whose thinking has shaped you as an individual. This includes family, teachers, coworkers, friends, mentors, authors, or even strangers. And I started thinking, I'm like, I've thought of my mom, of course, right? My mom,
Mm-hmm.
my dad. But then as I started thinking a little bit more, I'm like, let's just give this a little bit more time. I started realizing that there were books at certain part of my
Mm-hmm.
life that influenced me. Maybe like 1 or 2 people that came in and just were never seen again in my life, but
Mm-hmm.
they changed the way I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this is just an interesting question to start with that one being number 1. When you go through these 6, what is your hope for the people going through them? That they discover what?
Yeah, that they discover what those influences are and how they play out. Right? Because these are the things that shaped you. If you grow up in a certain household, right? If there are extended family, not extended family, it's all of the things that shaped us, especially very early in our lives. The one I hear quite a bit is a variation on a theme of, gee, when I was in 3rd grade, my teacher told me I wasn't good at blank. And it took me 40 years to work beyond that, right? And then people ask themselves, well, certainly it's not true now. Was it ever true? Right? Because people tell you things about yourself especially when you're younger, that you go, oh, okay, and go along your merry way. So the idea is, and this is, by the way, I think the hardest question of the 6, is the one that takes the most time. And it also includes people that helped you and people that hurt you, because you are influenced by all of them.
You're so right. Because I
Yeah.
was outlining it. I'm like, wait a second. This was for me personally, I was like, there was one time of 3 times where I was like, oh crap, like that changed how I function as a person. That changed my operating system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah,
True.
and I think the other thing too is that this is a very difficult question, but all 6 questions there's a little bit of tangential there. So sometimes if you spend a lot of time on question 1, it actually helps you answer the other ones because you've
I
already
did notice
thought of
that.
some of So there's a bit of overlap in there, and the other thing is that lots and lots of people have had some tough things happen to them in their lives, and so it can be difficult to answer these questions, to really kind of go there. But I love a quote which I put in the book, and I think is very true, and it's by C.S. Lewis, the British author. And he said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And I think that is just such a lovely quote.
Yeah, that is.
Right. But you kind of, in my mind, it's very helpful to understand your backstory. And that's a big part of your backstory. And it shows up in how we lead.
That's true. That's very true. All right. Self-criticism versus Self-reflection. You mentioned that it sometimes gets confusing. How do we deal with that?
Well, I mean, sometimes when I think about this, I think about kind of both facts and feelings. This happened, or this person said this, or I read this book, whatever it is. But then there's the other thing about, well, how did I think about that? How did I feel about that? How did it change me? So, I think that self-understanding to me is, as I say, understanding your backstory. It's understanding your own emotions, how they play out, how they impact other people, right? Our values, right? So there's the whole 6 questions. And it's fine to be self-critical, but I think it can go too far as well.
Okay. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. And I think most of us, including many and most of the people in our lives, are doing the best they can under the circumstances, right?
Well, yeah, they are. Yeah, it's true. I find that books like yours, though, if when we take the time to read it and invest our time into it, it allows us to grow into being more reflective so we can change, because a lot of we don't know what we don't know, right? So this is what makes your book so valuable, right? It's like everyone should be reading a book like yours, and it allows us to just show up better for ourselves and for our family and for who we're in business with. That's why I was excited to talk to you, because I think the topic that you bring up, right, when you've got to manage yourself, I feel like somehow, is it being forgotten in the last few years? What the hell's going on? Like,
Well,
did you forget you
yeah.
have a responsibility to show up better? Stop being such a jerk.
Yes. Well
Like,
said.
what is going on?
Yeah. Well,
What do you think is going on? Like, what happened?
Yeah. So, I think that, I think there's lots of things going on. There's a book, I'm going to forget his name, but called The War on Empathy. And the writer, he's from Stanford. I'm blanking on his name.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the things that he talks about is how empathy scores in the United States, and in all likelihood, probably across the world, have been going down for over 30 years. And so the big question is why? We're just not, we just don't care as much about other people. We don't care about their well-being as much. And I think that fuels what you're talking about.
Yeah, I could see that. And do you think that has to do with, as you're writing this book, did you think through, I'm sure you did something along these lines, but as you're managing yourself, how much of that is also saying, hey, you know what? I know how Tristan, I know how you feel sometimes when you're watching too much of that on social. Maybe you shouldn't be watching that much on social.
Yes. I think, well, yes, because if we think that self-understanding is hard, self-management is harder, right? Because the self-understanding gives you the insight. And then, you may remember, I also had these 3 questions of what type of leader are you now? What type of leader do you want to become? And then what's the delta, right? What's the difference? And therefore these are the behaviors that you may want to work on, right? The self-management. And so, yeah, that's a big part of it. Because if you just stop at self-understanding, you're going to get some insight, and that is helpful. But it won't necessarily change the way you show up.
How do you change the way you show up? Like, what effort does that take on your part?
Yeah, well, it depends on, what it is that you're working on. Lots of people want to learn to listen more intently, not cut people off. Some people want to learn to delegate more effectively. Some people want to learn how to be more open to ideas and not shut other people down when to kind of be more curious. But so it depends on what you're really trying to do. I know earlier in my career, I had, what I talk about with the S curves. The idea of the S curves is that when you're learning a new skill or behavior, you do not get better in any linear fashion. You get better, as I say, slowly and then quickly. and then you level off. And so, you know, if you think about learning a new behavior in the very beginning, it's not habitual for you. So you don't really know how to do it. You're going to react in a certain way as opposed to responding in a way that you want. So you have to kind of think about it more about, well, what would that look like? How would I do that? How can I manage myself toward that? Who do I know that does this well? Could I watch them? Could I ask them for advice? You know, should I tell other people so that they can give me feedback? You know, all of these kinds of things. So as you start, you get better slowly, and then things start to come together, and then you get better quickly. And then, you know, with any new skill, you kind of level off, and you know, a lot of additional effort is going to get you some marginal results. And, you know, I had one of those a bit earlier in my career when I was working in strategy consulting, and I came out of a meeting with a very senior partner and a client. And the partner turns to me and said, "Margaret, how do you think the meeting went?" And I said, "Oh, I think it went well." And then he said, "And how do you think you did in the meeting?" And, you know, I kind of struggled for what to say there. And he said, and he looked at me and he kind of laughed and he said, "Right." He said, "You know, one thing you should keep in mind is that this client is paying us a lot of money to help him solve this hard problem." And he said, he's gonna infer the value you bring to this team by what you say, right? What you say in meetings. And he said, in that meeting, you didn't say much. So there's probably, a big question mark in his head right now about what value you bring to the team. And of course you're thinking, oh no, you know, not what I wanted. But he looked at me and he said, "I think you're an introvert." And I said, "Yeah, I am." Right. So I'm very good at listening and putting things together and, you know, understanding some of these things. But I wasn't very good at speaking up in meetings, right? Because I was observing and things like that. So he said, "Yeah, so this is going to be a little harder for you." And he said, "So let me give you a piece of advice." He said, "Before every meeting, you should think of 3 questions you have about the topic we're going to discuss, and 3 points you could make about the topic we're going to discuss, and then launch into one of them early in the meeting." And he said, it will get you in the game. It will prime your pump. You'll be part of the discuss. It was wonderful, wonderful
That's great advice.
But remember the S curve? Yeah. I was horrible at it in the beginning.
That's funny.
I torpedoed the next 10 meetings, you know, that we'd be talking about something and I would jump in with a question that would just like pull us this way. Or I would, you know, make a point that was like way off target, right? I had prepared for this, but my timing was all off because I was so nervous. I was so in my own head about how I had to get better at this. And so, you know, one time for example, I would launch into it too soon and take us off track. And then the next meeting, I would try to course correct for that. And I would not get in soon enough. And I'd hear one person make my point or another person ask my question, right? So I just felt like there was this pendulum going until I kind of got it right. But it was very embarrassing as I was learning.
That's funny. I didn't know you were going to go that route. All right. So then in self-reflection for you personally, do you journal? Do you talk it out loud with yourself? How do you find yourself reflecting and growing?
Yeah. So, you know, I've done those 6 questions. That's where they came from, you know, and I keep them. In fact, my answer to the first question is 6 pages of single space type. Right. It's a long list. I believe you. And but I go back to them. You know, once or twice a year and update them because as you go through life, you see things differently. You know, you have a different lens. And it keeps some of those lessons in mind. And sometimes I'll change things, right? Because I'm like, I don't think that's true anymore. I think that's a big thing. But the other thing I'll say about journaling is I do it, I'm going to say intermittently. I'm not an everyday thing. I'd like to get there. I'm not there yet. But one thing I find is that if you're having a really difficult day, a challenging emotion, a hard relationship, a difficult conversation, some of these things that really get you charged up, that one of the best things that you can do is to get it out of your body, out of your head and onto paper. And so I oftentimes encourage people to, go to your printer, grab a piece of paper and just write, just whatever is coming out of your head, let it flow through your arm, through the pen and onto paper. And it may be ugly, right? It may have some pretty choice words in there, and fine, right? Fine. But then I tell people, I say, how many of you don't do you journal or do anything like that because you're afraid somebody will read it? And a decent number of hands go up, and I say, great, that's what paper shredders are for, right?
That's right.
Right? You do it, you get it out of your body, because sometimes when you look at it on paper, you see things differently, right? It's like, oh, that sounds a little whiny, or, maybe I didn't consider their perspective here. And so, but again, if you don't want somebody to read it, just run it through a shredder.
That's true. I like that. Yeah. One thing that you mentioned earlier that stuck with me was when the S curve, going back to the S curve. And you mentioned that at some point with your example, you kind of botch it and then you get better at it. You're like, okay, what can I do as you're reflecting? And then you mentioned that you have marginal gains once you get to a certain point. I have a question about that because some of the people that I've interviewed or talked to or books I've read, Charlie Munger comes to mind, where he's like, the longer we stick to things, long term, the better we get at them. But we live in a society that just says, oh, you know what? I can't get any more out of this. I'm out. How have you seen good leaders, stick to those things that they're still doing, even though they're only gaining marginal gains? What's that thing that they have or that they practice that allows them to stay there longer?
Yeah, I would say they keep at it, right? So just because you're trying to develop a different new skill doesn't mean you gave up on the earlier one, right? So if you want to listen more effectively, say not cut people off or something, let them finish their sentence or something like that, going on and learning your next skill doesn't mean you say, okay, I'm done with that one. Now I'm going to go back to cutting people off. Right. So you continue doing that. You're just layering onto.
That's so funny. All right, wait, is cutting people off a pet peeve for you? Because it is for me. That's why.
Sometimes it can be because you haven't gotten the full thing out, or also if somebody finishes your sentence because they usually finish it incorrectly. Right? They didn't know what you were going to say. So now you have to stop and say, well, no. Really,
like,
this.
Yeah. So funny. That's funny. That's true. All right, I've got a question for you. I didn't want to forget to ask this one. You mentioned that effective leadership is a creative act. How can leaders balance creativity and structure in environments obsessed with metrics and KPIs? And I worked at corporate for a little bit as a CMO. And man, I was like, this is just not for me. Like, I can't fit in. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So the KPI piece, when it was demanded of me, was very tough because I felt like I was being taken a different way and I was losing that creativity piece. How do we deal with that?
Yeah. So when I think of leadership as a creative act, I heard somewhere Ed Catmull, who was with Pixar, former head of Pixar, and he talked about he mentioned one time that people always asked him, "Hey, now that you are, leading the organization, don't you miss being on the creative side?" And he said that question always kind of made him go, huh? Because he said, I actually think management or leadership is one of the most creative parts of business, right? He said, because what you're doing is you're working with people that are all very different, and the creativity comes in. How do I work with this person? How do I get the best of them? Best with them, right? And how do I get them all to work together well, right? So he said that just takes a whole lot of creativity. And so I think there's a lot of truth in that people aren't widgets, right? Each person is different. Just like if you have children, I always ask people, if you have more than one child, you treat your children the same, exactly the same. And everyone goes, no. And I ask why, and they said, because they're very different. And I said, right. So is everybody at work, right? So why would we think that they're so similar when, our own DNA is not similar in our different kids?
I like that answer. I may use that one. I like that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Towards the end, you end with Marianne Williamson's quote about fearing our own light. I'm bringing it up here because you brought up this person at Pixar. Why do you think so many leaders play small? And how can they give themselves permission to lead in full power, especially with the current atmosphere that we've got going on right now? I feel like we're overly judged, and if we make a mistake, we may be canceled, right? Or we may go through something where we're blasted on social media, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the self-understanding piece, right? That when we do understand ourselves, we understand sort of how we became the person we are. We understand what we want. We understand what we're willing to trade off to get that. We understand our values and how we make decisions, right? So it's a big grounding exercise. And so I think that actually gives you more ability, I want to say, to stand up for what you want, what you think. And part of that can be, you said how you sort of chafed in a certain way, and you're really an entrepreneur at heart. Maybe other people are too. So, there's once you understand yourself, you can do something about it, right? You can understand those things. So is it easy? Oh gosh, no. But I do think a lot of times that we fear how powerful we can be. And so we do hide our light under a bushel.
Interesting. I like that. Well, I wrote down right now when you were saying that we understand ourselves through this exercise so we can show up better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You get insight and you say, okay, which parts of this do I want to, tinker with? Do I want to tweak? Do I want to adjust so that I can become more of the person I want to become?
Well, it's interesting because with the questions that you had, those 6 questions, when I got through them, and I didn't go as extensive as you. Okay, multiple pages.
You don't have yet. 6 pages?
Not yet.
There's still time.
Not yet. But I did notice that if I would have gone further with this, which now that I'm talking to you, I will, I felt like it was becoming a set of principles on how I live my life and how I show up. And I felt through this last piece that you said, I felt like it was giving me permission on how I should show up.
Great.
Which was interesting.
That's
was
great.
Like, interesting. So now that I'm piecing it together, now that I'm talking to you, I'm like, oh, interesting. It's almost like Nike had a what would they call it? Like these principles that what was his name? Mr. Knight wrote out.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's kind of like that. We're inverting into it. We're reversing into it through the questions. It's like, it's almost like, listen, if you want to figure out who you are, answer these 6 questions and you can show up better at the end of this so you can lead better.
Yeah. The understanding part, right? Helps you understand how you are now. And then the self-management part is saying, which parts of this would I like to enhance? Right? I always think of that, we're always in the process of becoming, and we're all a work in progress. And, so too are the people that work for us. So we're constantly evolving.
How graceful are you with yourself when you're like, how do you do it? When you make a mistake, you're like, that's not who I am. Like, because some people like relive the moments over and over and over in their head, and they just can't get over it, and then they just go the other route.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that can be hard, but I've never liked the thing of that's not who I am, because actually that is who you are. That's what you did, right? But you can say, that's not who I want to be. That's not how I want to behave, right? So we have a lot more agency is what I would say. And, I think it's fine to be self-critical sometimes. If you are not where you want to be, think about it. If you're learning a new language or you're learning a new musical instrument, you're not going to be perfect at it yet. The more you practice it, the better you're going to get. And leadership to me is very similar. That, the more we practice it, the more we think about it, the more we get coached or get feedback or these kinds of things, the better we're going to get. If we want to, right? That's the thing. There has to be the motivation. And I think intrinsic motivation is pretty powerful. If you tell me I have to change, maybe I will. If I want to change, I will.
What have you noticed being the fastest way that a leader has changed for the better? What have you noticed in the past, maybe from your personal experience? Did it always come down to somebody just hitting rock bottom and then saying, got it, I see, the problem is me, right? I've got to change it. Or did it happen a different way? What have you seen has been the fastest way to change for people and leaders?
I don't know that I would actually even be able to answer that question. And I don't think fast is the measure. I think effective is the measure, right? That a lot of times if we do something fast, we try to change fast, it doesn't stick, right? Because it's...
Listen, I'm trying to lose pounds by the end of today at the gym. How do I do it?
Right. Yes. But I think that the thing is how do I evolve, right? That's the way I think about it.
Damn, that's good. How do I evolve? Now you're asking yourself a more realistic question, right? How do I evolve? Because you're saying it's going to be in stages, because that's how evolution works.
That is how it works, right? And you have some backsliding too. You talk to anybody who's tried to make changes and they're not perfect. They mess up too. And I think that's one of those things you just have to kind of say, okay, I don't want to do that again. What lesson did I learn from that? I'm going to get back up on that horse again.
I like that question. I'm going to add that as the 7th question from you. Seriously, like, how do I evolve?
Yeah. Well, to me, that is the self-management, right? The self-understanding is what gives you insight. And the self-management part is, okay, now how am I going to evolve towards the leader I want to be?
No, that question is one that you would ask all the time. All right, so how are you evolving? What are the things that you're doing in your personal life to continually evolve?
Yeah. One of the things that I've been doing is, I teach a lot. I do a lot of teaching both at Harvard and a grad class and through executive education. I've started doing more speaking and now writing and things like that. And I found that I really like these things, and they are all a craft and continually get better at those. So because I think leadership is important, and if I could make a big change in the world, I would love to evolve the craft of leadership. And to be able to do that, I'm going to be able to need to write about it well and speak about it well and teach about it well so that people can understand it. So I'm working on those
I like
continually.
that. So you're actually showing up daily so that you can better understand leadership and lead that way. That's awesome.
Well, and also I must say is I think anybody who teaches anything is also doing it partly for them, right? So I get to be reminded all the time about these things because I also need to keep them front and center.
That's funny and true. All right. So then, are you going to write your next book on some type of leadership or things you've learned along the leadership route, or what are you thinking of writing? Because I know your brain's already thinking like, what's next?
I don't know. I have a few things I've been thinking about, but I'm not 100% sure. There will be another book.
Okay, maybe articles.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. I found it. Writing is hard, but I like editing. So if I can get something on paper, then I can edit it. But we'll see. We'll see. There's a lot of opportunities, and we'll see which one is next.
What concerns you about leadership right now in the world we're in?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think that we have, as that book pointed out, the war on empathy, we do have a lack of empathy that shows up in a lot of discussions and things like that. I think that there is a lot of fear. It's, is what you said of, if I say something, what will be the repercussions of that. So I've always thought that we needed more and better leadership. I think we need more conversations. We need to be able to disagree, but still listen to other sides. That just because somebody has a different opinion than you do or a different thought doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong or that they don't like you. So I wish we could have more true discussions and what I'll call a true debate, right? To look at what can we learn from this.
Okay, I like your answer. So if I'm looking to lead better, I would definitely pick up your book and then go through those 6 questions. And then you have to do better than Margaret. You have to go way past 6 pages on question number 1. Okay, that's
all those competitive people.
Yeah, that's why I'm telling everybody. 6 pages isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
All right, that's number 1. Number 2 is more of a question for you on where should we go to be more engaged with where leadership is going. Do you listen to certain podcasts, read certain journals, articles, books? Where would you recommend we go to dive further into this besides your book?
Yeah, well, I actually, if people are interested, I have a list of book recommendations in the book, also a longer list that's on the website as well. But, my feeling on this is just always, if you're curious about something, follow it, read about it, ask people about it. That's, I think, one of the most effective ways of learning.
I agree. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.